Hi, everybody. Welcome to Talking Animation, the show where we like to talk about the latest animated films. And we're really excited today to be talking about the final Pinocchio film from 2022. We didn't think we'd be getting 3 different versions, but we did. And we're talking about Guillermo del Toro's version of Pinocchio. And I'm film critic Rachel Wagner. I'm so delighted to have with me one of my local Salt Lake film critic friends. Sean Means is here. And Sean, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, happy to be here.
Well, since this is your first time on the podcast, why don't you introduce yourself and tell our audience a little about what you do?
All right. My name's Sean Means. I'm the culture editor at the Salt Lake Tribune. Have been at the Tribune for 31 years. 25 of that was as full-time movie critic. That kind of stopped in 2018. I still do write and cover film and other arts stuff for the Tribune. But for the last year, I've been the editor, so I get to order other people around to go do those things. And I also I still write reviews. I have my own site called The Movie Cricket. It's at moviecricket.net. And I write reviews there. So
yeah, and we should say we have had your wife Leslie on the podcast to talk about World of Tomorrow, so that was really fun. And yeah, let's dive in. Let's talk about Pinocchio. Well, I guess we should start out saying, what are your feelings about the 1941 film? Is it a favorite of yours?
1940. I mean, it's definitely, I'd say at very least within the top 5 of Disney animation of all time. I mean, it is. It was. I mean, it was the second one after Snow White, wasn't it? And it. I mean, I think obviously revolutionary for the era for 1940, and beautifully put together, and it had so many different elements going on simultaneously. You had the sort of ethereal aspect of the Blue Fairy. You had the comic aspect of having Jiminy Cricket as the narrator and conscience to Pinocchio, and you had scenes that I think could classify as pure horror. As you know, when you get into Pinocchio going to Pleasure Island and turning into the donkey, and the final confrontation with Monstro. We should be saying spoiler alert. I don't, although for an 82-year-old movie, maybe you take your chances, I suppose.
Yeah.
And of course, what's so great about it is that for most of us, it is the definitive version of the Carlo Collodi novel from late 1800s, and there have been so many movie versions of it. We say this year, we've had the 3, but we've had in recent years, we've had so many versions that Roberto Benigni has been able to play both Pinocchio and Geppetto in different movies. Right. That's how often they do this.
Yeah, it really was surprising when I went through, because I was thinking of doing a whole series on the different Pinocchios, but there are so many.
Yeah.
Just in stop motion, there's a bunch. Yeah, that I'd never heard of once you start digging. But yeah, it is kind of interesting that we have kind of focused on that this year. It's always weird how that happens in Hollywood. You get the twins, in this case triplet.
It's the Dante's Peak volcano, Armageddon Deep Impact.
Bugs Life.
Bugs Life and Ants. It's always, there's always that idea of somebody has a great idea and somebody else has the same idea at the same time, and neither one wants to cede the territory.
Yeah, I mean the 1941 classic, it took me a while to kind of warm up to it because I didn't like being scared as a kid. I wasn't. I was pretty wimpy, and I've been working since I became a critic to be braver.
Right.
I've been trying to watch more horror and trying to, but so it's only been in the last probably 10 years that I've really started to appreciate Pinocchio for. I mean, I obviously appreciated the animation before, but for the craft in the storytelling, in the way it teaches children to these moral lessons throughout the story so well. And I mean, if it doesn't make you not want to be a be bad. The scene,
Mhm.
the donkey scene. I think we convince any kid straighten up. That was always the most terrifying.
Right.
Is seeing, like, Lampwick well, especially Alexander when he's talking to the coachman, and
Mhm. Right. Well,
and
and
then he just throws them over to the pile of the ones that can still talk. It's like, oh my gosh.
right. Well, and I think, I mean, what's fascinating to me, one thing that's fascinating to me, and we'll get into this when we get deeper into the Del Toro is, I mean, the message of the message of the 40 of the Disney 1940 version is, as in Jiminy's words, always let your conscience be your guide.
Yeah.
And the notion, but within that context, obeying the people who tell you to do things is, you obey your father, you obey authority, your school teacher, you obey authority figures,
Yeah.
you do what you're told. And I love the way how I love in the Del Toro how they twist that,
Yeah.
and get into it. And we'll also get into the Zemeckis,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah. I
and they're obeying is they're the obeying authority is a different thing altogether, because
yeah.
it's free agency is sort of taken away from Pinocchio in that instance. He's not the one at fault for the things that happened to him the way that was
Mhm.
in the 40 version.
Yeah, it's interesting because there are a number of things that really annoyed me in that Zemeckis film
Mhm.
that they do in this one, but it didn't bother me as much. Like the fact, I mean, the ending's basically the same, and I hated it in the Zemeckis version. Him not turning into a real boy. I hated it there, but in this one, it didn't bother me as much. I
Mhm.
don't know. It felt more earned, I guess.
Yeah. I have a theory about why. I think the reason for the way they did it in the Zemeckis, where you get only the hint at the end that he's turning real, I think that was more a more pragmatic issue, in that you have invested so much in creating the CG character that looks just like the 1940 animated character,
Mm,
that by trying to do that, you have basically painted yourself in a corner where you can't go find a real actor who looks like the cartoon, and so you don't try. You just leave that basically blank, because and that has less to do with an artistic choice as it is an IP choice, that you,
mm,
because you're trying to stick to the intellectual property of what Disney had done originally. You have stuck yourself with not being able to make that transition, make that transformation to a real boy by using live action and CG, because you would have to find a real boy actor who looked like a cartoon, and
right.
that's going to be impossible. So,
Yeah, that's true.
and you're not
That's true.
you're not going to be able to create the CG version to look enough like a real boy. You're gonna land in the uncanny valley, and mess you, and that'll mess you up too. So, I mean, that may be the least of the problems with the Zemeckis, but I
I,
think they did screw themselves over,
yeah, that's a good point.
painted
I
themselves in
mean,
that corner.
I did a whole podcast about how much I disliked that movie. It was really gross to me. I just felt like it was the most sort of lazy filmmaking. Even I didn't even think the animation looked good. I thought it looked kind of washed out and really bright in every point. The character designs I didn't like. I mean, I just didn't like anything about it. It was terrible.
It was a movie that was born in a boardroom.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is a movie. This is not a movie you show to audiences and try to warm their hearts. This is a movie you show to the shareholders and tell them that this is going to make money for you off
Yeah.
your IP. And I mean, and also, it is once again Zemeckis getting so in love with the technology that he loses sight of the humanity,
Yeah.
which has been a thing with him for ages.
Yeah.
You can go back to most of the movies he's made in the last 20 years,
Yeah, I
whether.
feel like you have to go back to Castaway. I feel like that's
Mhm. Yeah,
the
and
last.
Castaway worked. Castaway worked. I mean, you've had elements in Castaway that were technological, reenacting the plane crash and so on.
Sure.
But so much of that relies simply on Hanks,
Yeah.
and so but you look at Zemeckis, you look at his mocap animation phase with Christmas Carol and Mars Needs Moms and Beowulf, where he was just and Polar Express, frankly, which I mean I like Polar Express, but still he gets so enamored with the motion capture CGI animation that he loses sight of the grander aspects of it.
He
and
really.
and Flight, Flight I thought was good. Flight again had a plane crash scene that was a technical marvel. But what was
I
most
haven't seen
important?
that one.
But what was most important about that movie was Denzel Washington's performance. So, and so that one I would put in the same league with Castaway in that sense. But then you look at Welcome to Marwen. I thought did not work at all because it was so reliant on the CG. And if you've ever seen the documentary Marwen Call, you realize that you have a great story without having to embellish. So. Anyway,
well,
that's
thankfully we had Del Toro to save Guillermo del Toro to save the day and redeem Pinocchio after that terrible.
Right.
Do you think that there's anything about 2022 and what we kind of have just experienced that made us gravitate towards something like Pinocchio?
I don't know if 2022 specifically. I mean, obviously these things take 2 or 3 years at least to get off the ground. So let's look at what's been going on since let's go back to 2016, 2017, 2018. I can imagine why a story about somebody who lies a lot and it's so apparent that as the nose on his face, I can imagine why that would be popular after 2018. But I think I don't know. I mean, it's classic. B, if you don't link it directly to the Disney version, you have free copyright. I mean, there are always practical aspects like that, but I think there's a lot in it, a lot in the story. I mean, going all the way back to the original novel about. I mean, obviously it's a coming of age story in a very exaggerated, very direct, but also very direct sense. It is about childhood. It is about figuring out what childhood is about, what you are meant to do as in childhood. And it is a morality tale. It's about temptation. It's about doing what's right versus doing what's fun. And so
and especially this Del Toro version where they really lean into themes of fascism and how we can get how Pinocchio can get tricked into following what seems easy or exciting or fun, but doesn't really last. Yeah, exactly. Right. I think that's true.
I think it's fascinating in this one that instead of Pleasure Island, instead of the idea of you disobey your parents and go someplace where you're allowed to be bad, but you're going to get punished for it later. Instead, here you get you get military camp. You get the going to the being forced to train to be in the military for Il Duce, for Mussolini. And I love the fact that they set this in the late 20s, early 30s, where it wasn't a fake. It was the real Mussolini. And we're not doing metaphorical fascists. We're doing actual fascists.
Right.
And that might also be a offshoot of a movie that started its production schedule in 2018, 2019, 2020.
Yeah. Are you a fan of Rachel's reviews? Do you look forward to Family Movie Night, Female Film Critics panels, or the Talking Disney podcast? If so, please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a Patreon. As a patron, you get to access monthly events such as the watch-alongs and Q&As, where you get to talk to stars and find out the behind the scenes of the movie making industry. And you can pick what I review for Family Movie Night or even become a guest on the podcast. Podcasts and YouTube channels are expensive, and I really, really could use your help. I would so appreciate it. You also get to be a member of the Facebook group where we talk about all the films that we're seeing, and we have so much fun. Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies and select one of the Rachel's fan tiers. That's patreon.com/hallmarkies. This was co-written by Patrick McHale, and I think you can see a lot of his influence here. If you've seen Over the Garden Wall,
I have not, but I've heard. I mean, I've heard great things about it.
it's
So.
really great. And it has, I think, a similar tone and a similar aesthetic
Mhm.
to the it's not stop motion, but the similar style to
Right.
it. And he also did Adventure Time,
Mhm.
which you see, I think, some of the same sort of humor and sarcasm, I think, there.
I think the humor, but also the same sort of depth of character that
Mhm,
that you have with Adventure Time. I have actually watched some Adventure Time with my kids,
mhm.
and I'm impressed that it is so much more than just uh, uh,
Yeah.
a lark.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
got a lot of depth to it.
Yeah. Well, so let's dive into the movie. It starts out with you get to know Geppetto and Carlo.
Hmm.
Carlo is Geppetto's son. And I mean, this whole scene where he is working on this crucifix at the church, and then Carlo gets struck um, in a bombing and at the church, and that, I mean, that was just very devastating.
Hmm.
So sad. And I thought it was interesting, sort of the religious themes in the movie from
Right.
the very beginning.
No, I was. I mean, the prologue is just heart wrenching, where
Yeah.
you have Geppetto, Geppetto and his son, and already you figure Geppetto already has had loss in his life because we don't see Mrs. Geppetto anywhere.
Right.
We don't see Carlo's mother in evidence. So obviously something has happened there that we don't that we just take. We have to just sort of
Right. Right.
take internally that something has happened, but we don't know what. And I love a movie that will let you fill in those blanks on your own, which that does. Anyway, but yeah, that they have this wonderful life together. Carlo assists Geppetto in all his works, and is doing this. They're making this large crucifix for the town church, for the church in the village, and which comes into play later when Pinocchio first sets foot in the church. We'll get to that in a minute. But the father son relationship is so tenderly done and so beautifully done. And then the death. There's a bombing, World War One era bombing hits the church, and that Carlo is killed in that. And it I think the other part of that is it doesn't sugarcoat any of that. It shows that Geppetto suffers for years after. He is in pain. He is in grief. Um, plants the pine cone by the grave marker, and the tree grows from that. And the grief doesn't go away. And that a bit of anger, and bit in a fit of drunken anger, he chops the tree down and says, I'll build a boy. I'll build this puppet, and that's the tree from which he builds Pinocchio.
So, as a dad, what do you think about this as far as what age would you recommend this movie? It is pretty intense. I mean, it's got religion, war,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much a matter of whether my kid could handle it, or whether I thought a small child could handle it, as far as, like, the violence or
Mhm.
any of that. It's more a matter of how much would I have to explain to the child, and how much would the child be able to figure out, and how much would how do
Mhm.
I mean, how do you explain fascism to a 5-year-old?
Right.
And so, I mean, I think it is probably more suitable for slightly older kids, maybe 8 and above. I think they all have a sense of things. It's a better sense of the stakes involved than little children would, and that's fine. I don't
Mhm.
have a great problem with setting an age barrier or setting an age limit for movies. I get frustrated sometimes at people bringing way too small children to movies that they don't understand.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember long ago in my movie career, I went to a screening of The Remains of the Day, the Merchant Ivory, film,
Yeah.
and it was rated PG because there was no, there was no sexuality, there was no violence. It was a very quiet, movie about people suffering. That said, I saw some guy bring a 6-year-old to it, and
Oh,
it's like, it's not a kids movie. It is not, it may be PG rated, but it is not a movie for kids because it deals with grown-up things that kids aren't going to figure out. And sure enough, the kid was bored out of her skull, and was squirming and everything. And the guy and the dad was trying to, like, keep the kid under control, but it wasn't working. And it's like, know when to throw in the towel, with as a
like I
parent.
get it's hard being a parent and you want to
Mhm.
go see these things and maybe you can't afford a sitter or whatever, but
Right.
like, yeah.
No, but no, know when to give up. Know
Because it's not
when,
going to be a pleasant experience for you.
yeah, you're not going to enjoy the movie. You're gonna miss half the movie. You're not
Yeah.
going to enjoy the movie.
At least
Uh,
I feel like with Pinocchio that it's always been kind of a story that's had an edge to it. It's always been kind
right.
of challenging.
Well, except in the Zemeckis version, and that's
Yeah,
another
yeah,
problem.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so they really do explore themes of, like I said, religion, war, revenge. What did you think about the character design and how they made Pinocchio look?
oh my gosh. Well, first off, stop motion just is, I don't want to say it's a superior form of animation, but it is
Yeah.
definitely, you definitely get something in stop motion you don't get with CG or hand drawn or anything else. Um, you get this tactile sense. You get the sense of things being real and, something you can reach out and feel. Um, and I mean, and the fact that Del Toro directed this with Mark Gustafson, and he's been doing this for ages. He was with Will Vinton Studios back in the claymation days. Uh, did California Raisins, did Return to Oz, things like that. And of course, the as you probably know, the history of Will Vinton, Will Vinton Studios,
And Leica.
eventually became Leica after Phil Knight bought Vinton out, and so they're still up there in Portland, just making magic. And you get, you know Coraline and Missing Link, and all the other, Paranorman, and all the other, Kubo and the Two
Hmm.
Strings, all the great stuff coming out of Leica. Gustafson was in at the beginning of that, and then he also was the animation director for Wes Anderson on Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Hmm.
So Del Toro picked the right guy to be his co-director on this thing. And you look at some of the behind the scenes stuff, and the fact that they had some models of Pinocchio that were only a couple inches high, and then they also had models of his head that were, like, bigger than your own head, uh, because they needed different things for the close-ups and different things for the long shots. And thinking in very much filmmaker terms, and the detail you can get, when you get really close up on one of these characters, I think is amazing. I think is amazing. I loved Geppetto's beard, how it stayed
Mm-hmm.
firm and solid no matter what. It got painted differently. I mean, in the early scenes, it's a little more brown, and then in the later scenes, it's all gone gray. But the fact that, like, did this giant sort of, picture frame of a face, on a face, for Geppetto's beard was just,
Hmm.
just one example. Or Volpe, the character that in the Disney is called Stromboli, the circus owner, the way his hair went up like wings, you know, or like antlers above his head, was a great character detail, and it gave him that sort of raptor look about him, you know, that he was a bird of prey swooping in on poor Pinocchio.
And there was a real tactile quality to like even just the ridges in Pinocchio, like in the back of his head, the way that they kind of the way that they designed it, and there were just so many little details that made you feel like you could touch it and feel it. And one of the things in stop motion, because I love stop motion, but they have started, I feel like, use more CG in stop motion lately to kind of smooth everything over. And I actually prefer when you can get that kind of tactile quality, when you can see even sometimes thumbprints in the backgrounds and things like that. I like that. I think it makes it I don't know, just more interesting to me than something that looks perfect.
Right. And you look at some of the claymation work that you know Will Vinton Studios did, and you look at Aardman, especially in the earlier Aardman. Yeah, you can, I mean, you can see enough of Nick Park's thumbprint in Gromit, you know, that you could probably you know use that to, you know, get into a cell phone. But
yeah.
And yeah, it shows you that a human being was actually manipulating this. It shows you that a person was actually doing all those things. And of course, obviously, you know, it is such a painstaking thing. You could to you know, move the thing a little bit and take a picture, move the thing another little bit and take a picture, the whole, you know. And stop motion, even more so than any of the other forms, stop motion seems to be like the most sort of labor intensive in that way. You know,
yeah, because I was disappointed with Wendell and Wild, because I love Henry Selick so much, and it's been so long since we had a movie from him, but I felt like it looked too smooth. It didn't look, I don't know, it didn't have that charm that his movies usually have to me.
Right.
And so this was really exciting. I mean, the animation, it's probably the scenes with Monstro are just absolutely amazing. The water just blew my mind.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's always been one of the trickiest things to do in stop motion is how do you depict water, smoke, fire, and, you know, all these sort of, you know, intangible things. How do you make that work in stop motion? You know, you have to basically get, like, you know, cellophane or tinfoil or something that you can move around to make it look like water, but then there's always that artificiality about it. I thought in this one the effects look brilliant. So
good. So they change the cricket to Sebastian is the name in
well,
this.
I mean, they we say change, you know, we have to, you know, let's the Disney version is not the uber, you know, is not the be all and end all of Pinocchio's. I think, you know, Jiminy obviously is Disney's thing, and they're gonna, that's, you know, I think they've got the copyright on Jiminy Cricket, the words Jiminy Cricket, locked up pretty tightly. So I have no problem whatsoever of reworking the character and giving it a new name, giving it a different name, as they do here. Yeah, Sebastian J. Cricket is the character.
Yeah, it's less of a, it uses like a little bit of a conscience, but it is pretty different, I would say.
Yeah, he's at
kind of more of an observer.
He's the he's the narrator, he's the observer, he's writing the journal of it all, but he also, you know, he claims ownership in a way, because he says, you know, this is my, you know, he found a home in this tree, and then when Geppetto chopped down the tree, it's like, okay, well, this is still my home, so, you know, even though it's, you know, inside this child, and essentially it's the bargain that the Blue Fairy makes with Sebastian to say, you know, you want to stay here, okay, you want to be the heart of the guy, well, now you're the heart of the kid, and you do this job well, then you'll, you know, we'll give you a wish. And I do like that, and I gotta say, Ewan McGregor as narrating the voice. We haven't gotten much into voice casting yet on this, but McGregor, I thought, was perfect for it. I thought he captured that sort of exasperation level of, you know, having to keep up with this kid. I thought he did a great job there. So
Yeah, it was really good. It was interesting with the blue fairy in this, that I didn't actually realize the first time I saw it that there were two different characters,
mhm.
that it was the wood sprite and then the wood sprite's sister that was
Right.
actually Death. I
Yeah.
didn't catch that until on the first watch.
I,
I thought it was
I
the
had
same.
it took me a second, and then you hear when Pinocchio, quote unquote, dies the first time, uh and winds up in the realm, in the underworld, with meeting the character of Death, and she says something about, my sister's breaking the rules again, by giving you life to begin with. um and so, which goes past the first time, and it took a minute for me to figure that out too. So and I mean, I love the two characters. I love the combination, that the and the idea that these characters, and the characters in the lore and the mythology, or these supernatural characters, of course, know each other. That they are all part of the same union, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, and Tilda Swinton doing the voice. I
Oh, I
mean,
love that.
amazing.
I love that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So Pinocchio joins the circus, and then we get the first of the nose growing scenes. And
Hmm.
later on, he uses the nose growing to help save the day, and that's what he did in the Zemeckis one. But that really annoyed me because it I felt like it denied the whole point of the whole lesson of the story. Like, he's supposed to learn that lying is bad, and here he's using it to get him free from the cage. But in this case, since he kind of used it twice, um I kind of, I don't know, it didn't bother me as much.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I remember, I don't know if you knew, there was a series called Fairy Tale Theater.
Yes.
Shelley Duvall produced it, and it was an anthology and it got a lot of stars to play these characters in fairy tales. I remember the episode where they did Pinocchio, and Danny Kaye played Geppetto, and Sandy Duncan played Pinocchio. And but they used that they did actually a bit in the story at the end, when they're trapped inside the sea beast, where Pinocchio has the idea to tell lies, so that she has so that his nose will grow, and that they will have firewood to start the fire, to make the beast open its mouth. So I mean, so that's, I have no problem whatsoever using that, having that as part of the story, because I've seen it done before in other versions, other
As
variations.
long as he still learns the lesson
Yeah.
to
No,
not lie.
well, and I mean, what he learned, I think what he learns is, I think what he learns, I don't think he learns the lesson not to lie. I think he learns the lesson that lying has its consequences.
Mhm.
But that there may be, and we all learn this, I think, in our life, there may be moments and instances where lying is something that's a necessity. Because you don't want to tell your mom that the meatloaf was terrible, or whatever,
Right.
or tell your wife that, tell your spouse that they don't look nice in that new outfit. Things like that, there are moments where lying has its uses, has its
Well, yeah, the
necessities.
noble lie.
Yeah.
Sort of the
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
Yeah.
Well, and it kind of comes full circle pretty quickly because he learns about this. He has this nose growing scene, and then he comes back to life, and Geppetto says to him that you are a burden, and why can't you be more like Carlo? And then Pinocchio says his nose didn't grow when he said I was a burden.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So
And that is like, that is just a shot to the gut in that scene, you know. And it shows, you know, that Geppetto is not perfect either. And that's another harsh lesson kids learn, is that their parents are human, and their parents have bad moments, and their parents, you know, and it's
well, and I think it's true.
Yeah,
I think it's true too that children are a burden, but they're Obviously a burden that is 100% worth it.
Right.
But you just don't normally as parents say that out loud.
No. And I think that says something. I think that says a lot about Geppetto being out of practice as a parent, maybe would be a good word for it. That he has, because of the pain in his life, and because of the loneliness in his life, he's relearning how to be a dad, just as Pinocchio is learning how to be a son. And I think part of the learning there, I think part of the learning for Pinocchio in that instance is that parents will say things that they probably want to take back, but that they still love the child in spite of that. So
yeah, that was probably the most shocking kind of moment of the movie. Just you just feel so bad. I don't know, a burden.
Right. Well, but then you see, you know, the contrast of the Podesta and Candlewick, and that relationship, and you know, Pinocchio sees that, and it's like, well, okay, I mean, Geppetto may be maybe mean, you know, maybe angry at times, but he's a pussycat compared to that father-son relationship.
So then Geppetto and Sebastian get swallowed by the dogfish, and then this is when Pinocchio ends up in the training camp. He insults Mussolini, and he befriends Candlewick. And so this war section, I have to say, if I was going to critique any part of the film, I do think this goes on a little too long. I think it drags it gets a little weighed down. I think it's just a little too much. I don't know. How do you feel?
I don't know. I mean, it worked for me because I think it works as part of the whole the whole overarching, you know, I mean, one of the messages we're getting in here is anything that makes the point of, you know, war is bad and should be avoided, but also the fascism is bad and should be avoided. I think those messages come across very, very well and very clearly. And the idea of, I like that it examines and it takes apart and knocks down the idea of to be, you know, the notion that to be a good Italian, to be a good fascist, he has to kill his best friend. That the Podesta tells Candlewick that, you know, shoot the puppet, and it's like, to what end? And the father, Podesta, is saying that this is how you're going to prove that you're going to be a good fascist, that you're going to be a good Italian, that you're going to be loyal, true, you know, Italian. And I think it's a great message to impart to kids, that you should be circumspect of any call to patriotism that relies on that level of cruelty. That it's like, if you're being told you can only be a patriot if you're cruel to somebody else, then, you know, maybe there's something with patriotism that needs to be reexamined.
Yeah, and that not all adults are right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Do you-
and he comes across, I mean, bear in mind, Pinocchio has a pretty bad run-in with most adults.
yeah, that's true.
Most of the adults he encounters are not looking out for his best interests. They're either trying to exploit him either as entertainment or as cannon fodder.
Mhm.
And that is a hard lesson to learn for children, that not all grownups are on your side. And that you have to learn which grownups to trust, and learning that your parents are the ones that you should be able to trust. So,
Yeah. Did you miss Pleasure Island at all?
well, after the Zemeckis, not at all. Because that was such a
Root beer.
that root beer is going to get you every time. That was a botch all around. And I gotta say, I mean, I recognize, it's 2022 and all this, but Co-Ed Pleasure Island didn't do it for me either. That the girls were in there, the girls were turning into donkeys too, and it's like, okay, I don't know if that's a level of equality we want to be, striving for, but okay. But no, I think that this version, the Del Toro version, is more rooted in, I mean, the message, I mean, you could almost argue that every time he dies and has to spend time with death, with the Tilda Swinton death, that is maybe an even better, maybe a good substitute for just the I mean, it's I mean, it's a theme that so many different mythologies, and especially children's mythologies, have, of like going to this place that's supposed to be fun and enjoyable and pleasurable, but it turns out to be a trap. Whether it's the lotus eaters in Greek mythology, or whether it's the poppy field in the Wizard of Oz. This idea of this taking this route toward something more enjoyable, but there's a cost to be paid at the end.
Mhm.
I think, and in some ways the training camp fills that role in a way, is because they're pitching to you that this is what you need to do to be a good Italian, to be and all this. But it also is a trap. So
Now, Del Toro has said that he found similarities between Pinocchio and Frankenstein. Do you see that in the movie?
well, I mean, you got a guy living alone. He builds a creature. He builds somebody that comes to life and then has to deal with the consequences. I think that's a fair difference. I mean, the thing is, the same thing could be said for so many other, I mean, Short Circuit or AI, or this notion of you build something and it turns into something more, something different than you maybe expected, and turns more importantly, turns into its own thing. It is not a machine that you program. It is something that has self-identity and self-awareness and free, and eventually free agency, and that which again goes right back to the eternal dilemma of all parents, that you have a kid and you have a child, and the child is, you think the child's going to be just like you, but no, it's not. And you figure out how to best handle that, best get them prepared for the world, and make sure they don't wreck too many things.
Yeah. Well, and it's true, both stories have themes of what does it mean to be human? What is humanity? When is it versus, like a creature? When is it and when are you a real boy, kind of a thing, I think is a theme. So you can see that in both sort of stories.
Well, I love the scene very early on where when Pinocchio first leaves the house and goes into church, and everybody in the church is like, he's a monster, he's a demon, he's the devil, so on and so on. And it's like, no, he's just a kid. And it's like, well, then get that kid into school, and like that's going to solve everything supposedly. But I love the scene later when they're in the church and he says, that guy, he points up to the crucifix and says, that guy's made out of wood and they love him. I'm made of wood and they think I'm awful. What's the difference?
Yeah.
And Geppetto doesn't have a good answer for that.
Yeah. I was surprised the religious themes in the story. That was something I was like, I read someone saying, oh, it's just like the original, and I'm just like, are you crazy? To me is so different. Like, I don't know. I don't know how you could make it more different.
I've never read the Collodi book, so I don't know what all. I mean, there may be stuff packed in there that I don't know that Disney decided was just too, because he was trying to make a popular entertainment. And he was also trying to not to take off, the various church groups that will decide whether your movie gets into theaters back in the day. So I can imagine he would want to sort of sand down the more overtly religious aspects of it. So
well, and it makes sense when you think about Pinocchio during the 40s, when something like, if you think about like Masonic plays and some of those other kind of stories that were really popular during that time, that were very like a fable kind of a thing, that with a definite, we're trying to teach you this lesson kind of a thing,
right?
That it makes sense why he would be drawn to that. And I've always been so impressed by just, I don't know if Disney necessarily gets credit for like how bold he was, because it would have been so easy to just have made a bunch of fairy tale stories after Snow White was such a success. But then to do Pinocchio, to do Fantasia, to just like be pushing the boundaries every time is really impressive, I think.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, you look at the run in the early days with after Snow White, where you had Pinocchio. I don't know if I got the order right on these, but as you said, Fantasia, Pinocchio, Bambi, and the way that treats nature and the way that treats the sort of harshness of nature, and also of course the fact that the villain in Bambi is man.
Yep.
It
was bold.
It's very bold. And I think a lot of it was that because it was still in a time when you didn't know what was going to play. You didn't know what was going to work. And so you just, and you didn't market research things down to the nth degree as current corporate Disney does now. And you were able to basically go on your gut, and Disney. I think Disney's gut instincts in that era were probably better than anybody's, and that's why so many things worked. Now, of course, not everything did work. Make My Music was not a popular hit.
Right.
This is only a few years before he made Song of the South, which everybody was telling him at the time, do you really want to do this movie that do the story that even the NAACP tells you is terrible, and
even back then that movie got a lot of that's people don't realize, I think.
I mean, there was the stuff you saw, I think it was last week, where they announced that Disney World's going to redo Splash Mountain as Tiana's Bayou Adventure finally, and people were like, you're ruining my childhood, the Brer Rabbit things are great. And it's like, okay, first off, nobody's seen this movie in 36 years because there hasn't been a DVD re-release or a theatrical release of this movie since the 80s. And don't tell me that it's a woke audience now saying that this movie is bad. The quote unquote woke audiences in 1946 were telling Disney, no, you don't want to do this.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And so Pinocchio uses his nose to help them get out of the dogfish. And then Geppetto dies. And so then Pinocchio uses his like last immortality, makes a deal with death, that if he can save Geppetto.
No, back up a minute. No, Pinocchio dies at the end of this, and Sebastian makes the deal with the wood sprite, saying, I've got this wish, and he uses that wish to
Oh,
bring,
right.
and bring
Sorry.
Pinocchio back to life.
I had it written
Yeah.
down wrong.
I watched it again last night just to refresh my memory. So yeah. But yeah, but no, it's Pinocchio's
but
death, because
he's no longer
death,
immortal.
because
though.
death is said, because the last time, because Pinocchio died in the dogfish,
Mhm.
and asked death, you can't let, because there's a timer on this thing, right? And he has to spend longer time in purgatory each time he dies. And he says, I have to get back now so I can save Geppetto. And death says, okay, but this is your last shot. And next time you die for real. And so Pinocchio comes back, saves Geppetto, but dies in the process. And then Sebastian uses his wish to bring Pinocchio back. Yeah.
And the wood sprite takes compassion on
Mhm.
him.
Yeah.
And so then he ends up outliving everybody
Mhm.
in the story.
Right.
And
because you see where they're putting in new grave markers, and it's Geppetto, it's the monkey, whose name I forget. It's
Spazzatura.
Spazzatura. Yeah. So there's a marker for the and that in the narration, Sebastian says, did Pinocchio die? I think probably he did, and eventually, or something like that. So it's left ambiguous. It's left open ended that how long he would have lived, and I think he, like, after Geppetto died, he left the village. He went on, to go travel, go have adventures.
What did you think of the songs? Alexander Desplat. And probably Ciao Papa is probably the most.
Ciao Papa is really beautiful. I thought the first one, the first song he does on the puppet stage on Volpe's circus was really funny. It was really, really, really charming. It's like not it's like the not I Got No Strings song.
Yeah.
But it serves the same purpose. I thought that was really cute. I'll tell you though, when they do the when they do the song for Mussolini, when they do the patriotic song, and then he sort of Weird Al Yankovic's the thing, and turns it into jokes about farting and so on, which is why Mussolini gets mad and decides, says kill the puppet. I thought that song was hilarious. I thought that whole scene was pretty hilarious in the way of sort of, poking fun at this authoritarian thing. So
yeah, that was good. I didn't even realize that there were songs in it until I was watching it. I didn't know.
Yeah, and I thought Desplat's score was really good. I thought I was really struck by that. I also like the running gag of Sebastian trying to sing the song about his father and getting interrupted every time, and then finally over the closing credits he gets to do the song.
Oh yeah, that was good.
That was cute.
Yeah, cute.
We were talking about voice actors a minute ago. I was to say the one that I loved the most, frankly. I mean, Ron Perlman as the Podesta was great, and John Turturro's in there for like 3 seconds as the doctor, but the one David Bradley as Geppetto was so good. I mean, and of course, we all know him as Filch from Harry Potter, and may know him from Game of Thrones. I've enjoyed him in the last couple of years. He shows up on Doctor Who frequently as the first Doctor, as the William Hartnell Doctor. But I thought his voicing of Geppetto was just really very cool, very, very I think grounded the whole thing. He's sort of the emotional core of it all. The other voice is that Spazzatura is voiced by Kate Blanchett.
Del Toro's got some weight when he can bring in Kate Blanchett to play a monkey.
The thing is, I think Kate Blanchett is the sort where Del Toro could call her up and say, "Hey, you want to come be a monkey in my Pinocchio?" And she'd go, she said, "Okay, I'm going to be in the studio in Melbourne tomorrow." So
yeah, that was really funny.
We'll do this.
It's a great vocal cast. So we already talked about Tilda Swinton. Kind of fun to see Tom Kenny in here. I always love it when they use actual voice actors.
Yeah, I
Movies.
mean, it's always I always enjoy it when like the pros get to do 3 or 4 voices as as much as I like to see celebs. Christoph Waltz's Volpe I thought was really good. I mean, of course, that voice just, I mean, he doesn't have to do much of anything, and that voice just carries a lot of the weight. But yeah.
And then Tim Blake Nelson is also in it. So yeah, it's a great vocal cast. It was an astonishing movie. I watched it and I just kind of sat in my chair for afterwards, like, oh,
Right.
whoa. And I think this year has been really amazing for animation. There's just been a lot that I've loved. I loved Marcel Shell. I loved the new Puss in Boots movie. I really liked Apollo 10.5. All of those plus this will all make my top 10. So
Yeah,
it's just been really good for me.
it's been a strong year. I mean, Marcel the Shell is one of my favorite movies of the year, and the animation, again, stop motion, again,
So good.
it's the whole notion that you get that tactile feeling you don't get any other way.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking about this with me. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. And if people want to follow you on social media or your website, how can they do that?
The movie website is moviecricket.net. My Twitter is Sean P. Means. Trying to think what else. Instagram is SP Means. And then just anything SL Trib. That's where the Tribune that's where the Tribune lives, and where, as somebody put it, where you can see my invisible hand of editing. So
nice. Well, very good. Thank you so much. And we'll hopefully have you on again soon.
I appreciate it. Thank you much.